Bismillah, let's continue. So, our faces were ready, but our minds weren't. At least, not yet. Those early Homo sapiens at Jebel Irhoud looked like us, but didn't think like us. Not fully. Not in the way that creates culture. Not in the way that wonders, imagines, or believes. And for a very long time, tens of thousands of years, nothing changed. No symbols, no jewelry, no religion, no graves with meaning. It's like humanity was waiting for something. Then, slowly, something did change. Not all at once, not everywhere, but in scattered places across Africa. Suddenly, we see signs. A red rock called ochre, used to mark skin or objects. Shell beads with tiny holes, like someone wore them as a necklace. Lines scratched into stone, maybe meaningless or maybe early symbols. Tools became more complex, longer, sharper, specialized, and then burials. A child laid carefully in a grave, sprinkled with red ochre, as if it mattered, as if someone cared, as if death had meaning. These are the earliest signs of symbolic behavior, of imagination, of culture. But here's the strange part. These signs show up around 100,000 years ago. That's 200,000 years after Homo sapiens first appeared. 200,000 years. What were we doing that whole time? Why the long delay? No one knows for sure, but there are clues. Some scientists think it was about population. Small groups mean fewer ideas, less innovation, and slower change. But when groups grow and meet, ideas mix, spread, evolve. Others think the environment changed. Climate swings push people together or move them around. That movement sparked contact and creativity. Maybe the brain had to change too, not in size, but in wiring. Maybe a small genetic change opened the door to myth, language, and meaning. A single twist of DNA, one lucky mutation, and suddenly we could imagine things that weren't there. Gods, spirits, dreams, rules, stories. And once that switch flipped, there was no going back. Once humans began to imagine, the world changed. Not the outer world, the trees, the rivers, the animals, but the inner world, the one inside our heads. We started to believe, to dream, to plan. We painted with purpose. We danced in groups. We sang. We made symbols. And we began to tell stories. Maybe at first, the stories were small, about the river spirit, or the moon, or why the jackal cries at night. But those stories grew. They tied people together. They gave meaning to life. They explained death. They taught rules. They shared wisdom. And most importantly, they lasted because stories could be remembered, passed down, changed and shaped, told around the fire, whispered to children, and through them, ideas spread faster than genes. A child could hear a myth and carry it far away, to a new land, to a new group, and just like that, culture was born, a new kind of inheritance, not in blood, but in memory. Symbols made it stronger. The red ochre became a mark of identity. Beads became beauty. Scratch lines became maps or maybe calendars. Carvings showed animals never seen, or spirits never born. We were no longer just surviving. We were expressing. And this expression, this creativity, set us apart. It wasn't just useful. It was emotional, spiritual, social. It made us human, and it spread like wildfire, from Africa to everywhere. But not all humans made it, because there were other humans too. Neanderthals, Denisovans, and more. They were smart, strong. They had big brains, too. And some even used tools or made symbolic marks. But something was missing. They didn't explode with culture the way Homo sapiens did. Not the same way. And over time, they disappeared. As Homo sapiens spread out of Africa, they didn't just walk into empty land. They met others. Neanderthals were already in Europe and parts of Western Asia. Denisovans in the East. Maybe even other unknown groups in between. And what happened when they met? Not war. Not always. Something more human happened. They mixed. They shared food, shared tools, And yes, they had children. Today, almost everyone outside Africa carries a small part of Neanderthal DNA. Some had the Denisovin genes too. This means our story isn't clean or simple. We're not from one perfect line. We're from many lines woven together. But while other humans disappeared, we kept going. Why? One reason may be the power of imagination. See, Neanderthals were strong. They survived ice ages. They hunted mammoths. They made tools. But Homo sapiens did something else. We formed large networks. We traded across long distances. We shared knowledge across groups. And we used symbols to stay connected. Paintings, beads, signs carved into bone. Even musical instruments, like flutes made from bird bones. These weren't just decorations. They were glue. They built community. They built identity. They let people belong. A tribe of 30 could become a network of hundreds, linked by story, linked by belief. That's power. Because in nature, strength is good, but numbers, unity, and shared purpose, that's survival. That's the power of culture. So even in cold places, harsh places, we adapted. We made better clothes, built better shelters, used fire in smarter ways, and passed all this knowledge down through words, songs, rituals. That's what made us different. We didn't just live. We remembered. We taught. We imagined. We planned. We became more than animals. We became human. The more we look at early Homo sapiens, the more we realize they weren't just smart. They were creative. Let's go to southern Africa, to a cave called Blombos. Inside, archaeologists found something amazing. Pieces of ochre, soft red stone, carved with crosshatch patterns, lines and shapes that mean something. They were made about 75,000 years ago. That's long before writing, long before farming, even before Europe's famous cave art. What do these patterns mean? We don't know, but they're not random. They show intention, design, symbolism. Nearby, scientists also found shell beads, drilled and polished. They were likely worn as necklaces or decorations. Think about that. A person 75,000 years ago took the time to carve a rock, to polish shells, to look beautiful, not for survival, not for hunting, but for meaning. And meaning is what makes us human. Let's look further north, to a place called Kafsa Cave in Israel. There, archaeologists found human burials, around 100,000 years old. One was a child, buried with deer antlers placed carefully near their head. Why? No one knows, but it shows care. It shows ritual, maybe grief, maybe belief. It tells us something had changed. These humans were imagining things beyond survival. They were thinking about death, maybe even an afterlife. And wherever you find that kind of thinking, you find the roots of religion, story, and culture. You find us. Because imagination isn't just art. It's power. The power to dream, to remember, to believe. And once our ancestors started imagining, there was no going back. Now let's fast forward. About 50,000 years ago, things were changing rapidly. Homo sapiens had left Africa, spreading across the world. And with them, they brought something special, the power of culture. At this time, in places like Europe and Asia, humans were creating symbols, not just for beauty, but for something more. There's evidence of carvings, paintings, rituals. But it wasn't just about making art. Humans were now telling stories. Imagine that. You could sit around a fire and listen to a story about the world. A story that might have never happened, but that could happen. Humans began creating myths. And with those myths, they began shaping reality. This was when our ancestors began thinking about things that didn't exist. Gods, spirits, ancestors, future generations. They were beginning to think abstractly, to think about what could be. And that is when the true explosion of culture happened. This was a time of great creativity, innovation, and imagination. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was about building something bigger, a society, a shared vision, a collective memory. And it spread from Africa to Europe, from Asia to Australia. humans began connecting. They learned new languages. They traded. They exchanged ideas. They passed stories down through generations. That's when the real magic of human evolution happened. Not in the brain alone, but in the connections between minds. The more we shared, the more we grew. And that's when Homo sapiens became us. A species that doesn't just survive, but thrives.